This time on Rad video, we're talking about symmetrical decks, we're talking about reverts versus rewinds, and a lot of other questions, so let's just drop right into it. Welcome back to Rad Video, the channel where you can learn something new about skateboarding 3 times a week. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we take a look at something in the skateboarding world, from tricks to your favorite pros to video games to answering your questions on Ask Rad every Wednesday. So let's get into the questions. First one is from Mick. Why are symmetrical twin tip boards not more common? I know there are some companies that make them, but only a handful. I think most people would love them if they just tried. I've been riding twins for 20 years and I can't imagine going back to standard directional shapes. They just make so much sense in every way. By the way, same goes for inverted Grind King kingpins. They're just better. Why not have them at least as an option in new trucks? In some ways, the skateboarding community is incredibly closed-minded and resistant to change. These are not even new gimmicks I'm talking about. And I think you have a really good point there, because I have been thinking about why the nose is bigger, and there are a couple of reasons, but they're not really good ones. So some people say the nose has to be bigger so that it catches your foot better when you ollie. It'll help you pull the board up in the air slightly more. Other people say it's bigger because you have to land on it. That one kind of makes sense. Like if you're going to do a 5-0, you pop the tail, land back on the tail, so it doesn't have to be as big. The nose, you have to slide up to the nose, catch it, and then land on it. So that really helps. And other people say that the slightly steeper tail will pop better going forward, so you can nollie slightly better. And I see something to that, because if I try to do one with my board the normal way, pop my tail doing a nollie flip, I do have a slightly more difficult time. But that doesn't really make sense when you get past like 1992 or 3, because nowadays when you're doing everything in every stance, you do fakie and switch. Those stances exist and you can do just fine in them. You can do switch tricks with the nose going this way, pop the nose, and it's fine. You can still ollie and level out in the air. It'll still catch your foot when you're doing kickflips. You can still do a switch nose grind and land on the tail. It still works just fine. So for me, I would say make boards that are somewhere in the middle where both are the same, and it makes everything so much easier. You don't have to worry about switching the board back around in lines, so you have a lot more options that way. Or you're not stuck using the wrong tail that you're not used to in a line if you end up doing something like that. So I don't get why they don't do that either. I don't really have a good answer for you. When I get freestyle boards, you can buy these that are symmetrical fairly often. This is one from Mode. The nose and tail are exactly the same, and I love that so much. I don't even have to think about which way my board's facing. I can do a combo, land with the board the other direction, and just keep on going. I don't need to learn my tricks 2 different ways with the nose and with the tail, you know? So I think that would translate to street just fine, and I wish that more people would do it too. I usually just get a normal board because I get whatever I can find that's the right size and cheap enough. So I don't really seek out symmetrical boards, but I do wish there were more available. As far as the trucks though, that's also a good question, because I used to have Crux down lows, and they had those, like the inverted with the Allen wrench hole and all that stuff. And then I got some regular Crux that are like the standard size, and they just have a regular nut on them. And I haven't had any problems, but I don't do a lot of Smith grinds and stuff where you really need to worry about the kingpin. But I don't know why that's not a standard thing either. It's slightly harder to find something that'll tighten it. You know, if you're a new skateboarder, you might not have a set of Allen wrenches. Dad's tool kit is going to have a wrench or a socket wrench or something to tighten a normal truck. But that's kind of a bad excuse. I don't know. I can't imagine it costs that much extra for a truck company, especially when they're doing it in bulk. But I don't know. I don't have an answer for you on that one. The next question is from Elijah Suarez, who says, "Hi, I want you to talk about board sizes. I ride a 7.75 on street and an 8 for bowls and vert. I want to skate something less big for street, like a 7.45, but when I ask for a smaller board at the skate shop, they looked at me like a freak. Do you think I'm wrong? I was searching, and Rodney Mullen used to skate 7.4. I think he actually had a 7.0 in the early 80s as well. And I have a 7.4. That's my freestyle board I just showed. This is, I believe, 7.4 or 7.3, actually, 7.3. And it works well for freestyle, but a problem you're going to run into trying to find smaller boards is, first of all, smaller boards are usually for freestyle. You're not going to find a lot of street boards that size. But the bigger problem is trucks, and I think that's why they're so hard to find. Because if you were to put out a board that's really narrow, like a 7.25 street board, what kind of trucks are you going to get? So these are independent 109s. That's what I have on Freestyle. And a lot of freestylers use this truck because it's the only one that's small enough. It actually has to be very small. It has to be like 7 because your freestyle wheels add extra width. So they cover the nut. And so when you add that extra width, the truck has to be narrower so that it still matches up. But it's harder to find trucks at that point. And I wouldn't use that for street. It's a really old school shape. It doesn't look like it's very stable. You're trying to do like really heavy grinds and stuff on it. I don't think it would hold up that well. So that's the biggest problem you'll find is getting trucks, even if you could find that board. So I don't think you're crazy for wanting a smaller board. They're definitely a lot of fun. When I was first starting skateboarding, 7.5 was common. That was what everyone skated. If it wasn't a 7.5, then you were kind of weird. If you were the 7.75 guy or like the 8.0, no one skated 8.0 in the early 2000s. And so it's kind of just the current trend right now. 7.45 that you want is like buy a 7.5 and sand it for 3 seconds and you'll be fine. But I don't know. That's just not the current way that people are doing it. You can probably track one of those down, but you're going to have some trouble with the trucks. So skate anything you want to skate. Do whatever you want to do, but it's just going to be a little bit tougher. The next question is from Mark Huberg, who asks, what is the best way for a new skater to learn trick names? I see a lot of different names thrown around and struggle to identify them myself. Well, the way I learned was from trick tip videos. These were really common in the late 90s to the mid 2000s. Transworld made a bunch of them. There was one with Jeremy Ray, Tony Hawk and Eric Costin had one. All kinds of ones like that. I would watch those and that's how I learned the names. And some of them are a little bit different than what I was used to. Like they would say heel flip shove it instead of varial heel flip, which is technically more accurate. To do a varial, you have to use your hand. It's a vert trick. So a varial heel flip might be correct on vert, but shouldn't really be on street. But that's a whole thing. The other way to do it is to play the Tony Hawk games because like the varial kickflip as an obvious example, those games kind of defined trick names for a lot of people. So even if they aren't technically as correct as they should be, a lot of people will use those names exactly the way that they did. So you can learn from games. Trick tips are a great way to do it. Either those videos from Transworld that I mentioned. I have a lot on my channel. There's a lot on the internet in general. If you know the trick well enough to be teaching it, chances are you know the right name for it, although that's not always the case. Aside from that, a lot of it comes from experience. What are people saying in the comments when you watch a video, that kind of stuff. It's a little harder than it used to be because there used to be a lot of forums you could go to. And people would have discussions and what is this trick? And they'd post a video, people would talk about it. That's a lot harder to do now. There's the slap forums, but I don't know if that's as beginner friendly as some of the other ones that used to be around. So yeah, I'll go with trick tips and hope for the best. You could try to learn from like Thrasher and Transworld captions, but the problem is that that's kind of backwards. The caption's there to tell you what this trick is if you already know what it is. You see the board upside down, it says 360 flip, then you know what that trick is based on the name, not the other way around, trying to learn it, you know. But hopefully that helps at least a little bit. The next question is from Mr. BG, who says, I've had almost all the trucks I've used become warped and make the board lean to one side and feel different while riding switch. This has happened even with new trucks within a matter of minutes. Not sure if it's the board. What can I do? That is a weird question. I've never heard of anybody instantly breaking trucks every time they skate them, unless you're like a really big guy and you're just slamming down on them, like dropping off of stuff. I don't know how you'd be bending the metal. If that's the case, if your trucks are actually bent, like the axles are bent and everything, I would go to the skate shop and ask about the toughest ones you can get. I haven't had to think about it, so I don't know exactly what would be the toughest right now, because they're more about lightness than like hardcore strength. But I would ask around about that if that's the case, but I don't think it is. I think chances are it's your bushings. Brand new trucks especially are going to have problems wearing in the bushings. When I used to get tensors, they had these weird bushings that would lock together, and they felt really, really weird, especially when you first started. Like you would land, let's say you landed heel heavy or toe heavy and you stepped off, the board would turn, like it would just turn on its own because it wouldn't snap back into the middle. And so if you're skating in a certain way where, I don't know, the way you cruise around or whatever, you're just kind of squishing the bushings on one side more than the other, I guess that could be possible. And the solution for that is to just go buy some really nice bushings. I don't think you're bending metal. I don't think you're breaking the truck. I don't think you're misaligning it or something. It's probably just the bushings. At least I hope for your sake, because that's a pretty easy fix. If you've heard of this or you've had this problem before, let me know how you fixed it, and hopefully that'll help as well. The last question from today is Daniel, who asks, what's the difference between a revert and a rewind? I've looked it up, but haven't found any consistent answers. And you're not going to find any perfect answers. Like most things in skateboarding, they just kind of happened. It's not like the X Games committee named all these tricks specifically and it had to be this way and these are the rules. It just kind of happened. So there's not always going to be a perfect answer for everything. But I'll tell you the way I name them, and hopefully that'll get you on the right track. We can debate it out in the comments and figure out what's wrong with my definition, but I think that this is a pretty solid one. So the textbook version of a revert, let's say you're on a ramp, you're doing either a grind or a slide or a stall, let's say a tail stall. You could land it by just dropping in. You could land it the way you are, but instead you're going to spin around all the way and roll away fakie. Or if you're going to go fakie, back to normal. And that works for a lot of tricks like lip slide or disaster, tail stall or tail slide, no stall. But for me, it has to be something that you could just drop in and land it. Like if you're in a nose pick, for example, you can't just drop in, you'll be sideways. You have to spin, and so you can't do a revert because you're already spinning, so you're just adding extra spin. It's not a nose pick revert, it's a nose pick 270 out. At least for me, you know, if you're going to do like a feeble or something, you have to kick turn in. You can't do a revert from that, but you can do a 270. So for me, that's the biggest thing to make it a revert versus a 270. But we can apply that same thing to flat. It's just not very common, but you could do like a kick flip, land it kind of on the nose and pivot around as you land. I wouldn't call it a backside flip because it's all after the fact. But you could have just landed it and rolled away, but instead you decide to spin all the way around at the last second. For me, that is a revert. It's a late landing 180 that you didn't need to do. All right? But for a rewind is a very specific version of a revert where you or the board is spinning and you stop it and spin back the other way. So if you do a tray flip, spinning backside, catch down the nose and pivot around front side, the board's reversing directions, you call that a rewind. If you were to do a 360 flip and land in a backside pivot, I wouldn't call it a rewind, I'd just call it a revert. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. It also works for spins with you. If you do like a backside flip, land and pivot that way, I might call that a backside flip rewind. To me, honestly, I don't think I ever use the term rewind for anything, but I wouldn't object to any of those uses because that seems like it's right. It has to spin and then spin back. Okay, so hopefully that helps. But there are a couple other ones. Speaking of like doing a shove it and pivot, that'd be a shove it rewind. But if you were to shove it, catch down the nose, then no shove it instead of pivoting, that'd be a shove it shuffle. You don't see that too often. You could do like a 360 flip shuffle where you do a 360 flip, land in and no shove it on the way down. Another one is the Mayday, which people used to use this term a lot because this trick was really popular for like a month in 2007 or something. But basically what it is, let's say you're going to do a rock and you're going to pivot back in, which you could call it a rock revert technically, but it already has a name, rock and roll, so don't do that. But if you're going to do one and you're about to pivot back into regular, but instead you slide it back and you come down to fakie, so you do like a 90 and then 90 back in. People were calling that a Mayday back in the day. So you do like a tail stall, start to revert, and then pull it back, be like a tail stall Mayday or something. But you lose all your speed, it has no purpose, it doesn't look that good, so not a lot of people do it anymore. So those are all the revert terms that I know. Hopefully that gave you a basis for how to figure out how to name them. But again, nothing's going to be perfect, but that should get you on the right track. So that's it for now. Here's some more videos you can watch. Until next time, you can also tap my logo right here on screen in the middle, and that way you can subscribe to keep learning new things about skateboarding 3 times a week. Thank you for watching.